Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, and Blayne Gilmer here. We are doing our previews of SEC football schedules. Today, we're getting to the two-time defending national champion, Georgia Bulldogs, who will try for the three-peat. A lot of folks think Georgia can do that, but Bulldogs have got an interesting schedule for a couple of reasons. Let's start with you, Blake. What stands out about Georgia's schedule?
Well, I'm very excited to hear Blaine's comments on the schedule. Yeah, it's there are some things that stand out. I think when you just look at it overall, certainly, I think starting off, UT Martin Ball State should be winnable games. You got South Carolina sandwiched in between that game against UAB. First road game isn't until September 30th. That's at Auburn. Ole Miss is your West opponent, which I'm not saying is going to be easy, but that's in Athens. There's no Alabama, there's no LSU, there's no Arkansas, there's no Texas A&M. I think it's another schedule that I look at, and I can't really find a loss right now. We'll get to that when we do our game by game predictions here probably next month sometime. But looks like quite a. I'm going to use the E word because Blaine's going to jump on me if I use the E word about the schedule, but I will say it's a manageable schedule. How about that? That's a better use of the word.
No doubt. Everybody's jumping on board saying, look how easy this Georgia schedule is. And it is, listen, my first argument, and that you'll hear a lot of people, I do stuff over at Rivals, and you see on message boards all the time, you see Georgia fans say, well, Georgia can't play themselves, which is a true statement, except in the spring. Okay, so that obviously, if you're back-to-back national champions and not able to play yourself, you're not adding to the strength of schedule for yourself like you are for the other teams that you're playing. But when it comes down to it, this schedule would have looked way different if on September 9th, the SEC had not made Georgia and Oklahoma cancel their matchup that was going to take place in week 2. Now I just feel sorry for Ball State because Kirby Smart has had to hear all of this stuff all offseason about an easy schedule, and he's going to want to take it out on them. No, but seriously, when it comes down to it, there are plenty of intriguing games in this. You got the Deep South's oldest rivalry you mentioned on the road at Auburn. You got Hugh Freeze coaching Auburn now. And one reason that's intriguing now, Blake, is because that yearly rivalry may be going away with how the SEC is going to be moving forward with an 8-game schedule and 16 teams. And then you've got 3 physical contests that Georgia will be taking place in after the bye week with Florida, Missouri, and Ole Miss leading up to that Tennessee game. So we'll break down all these game by game and things like that. But Chris, there's still plenty of meat on the bone, even though people like to malign the schedule here for Georgia.
Well, I'll tell you what, Blayne, I wish we could see Georgia play itself more than I'm excited about seeing some of the games on the September schedule. UT Martin will be a pushover. By the way, you can see on the ticker we've got at the bottom, I've gone through and taken an average of 4 sources I like, a couple of magazines and a couple of computers that are out as we're doing this in June, and that gives you an average of where these teams on the schedule stand in that 1 to 133 composite. Of course, UT Martin not in the FBS, so it does not have a rating there, but you can see the other 11 teams. Ball State, not exactly a game we'll circle in terms of games of interest this year. And UAB, September 23rd, that will be Trent Dilfer's debut. He leaves Lipscomb Academy in our backyard, our being Blake and I, to take a college coaching job. But then, guys, it gets interesting with the Auburn game on September 30th. But let's back up a minute. South Carolina on there, too. Now, look, I don't think Carolina is probably going to beat Georgia. We'll get into predictions later and everything. But Carolina under Shane Beamer has now had some nice seasons in a row. Now, that's a team that seems to get better later in the seasons. If you're Georgia, probably prefer to play them earlier rather than later, given what the Gamecocks have done recently. But, guys, what stands out to you about the September games? Blayne, I'll start it with you.
The first one, I know we said UT Martin, but Georgia faithful are excited about that game because Georgia gets a quasi-night game. They did not get one all of last year, so they are excited about that for recruiting purposes and things like that, getting to use those somebody said those LED lights that Georgia bought may be the worst return on investment in a long time because they haven't used them in a couple of years because they hadn't got night games. But so that is something that people are excited about. You pointed out South Carolina. Listen, there's just, quite frankly, there's no love lost between Kirby Smart and Shane Beamer, and they really that is a brewing rivalry, on the surface in terms of the teams and then beyond. And I think that you're really going to see a hard fought contest there. Georgia, they'll be juiced up after two, non-Power 5 opponents there to start off with. And then, to finish out, UAB is never a program that I think you can just, walk in and say, hey, they're going to be terrible. They've done really well in their conference last few years. Now they got, Trent Dilfer there. So we'll see how that goes. And then Auburn is going to end it with a bang. And like I said, it could be the last time the Deep South Oldest rivalry is played for a while. So Blake, what's your take on those September games?
Well, I think you may have said it a minute ago, Blayne. I don't remember, but I think what the September game, the Auburn one specifically, I think it's probably, I don't know if we'll talk about Auburn as we get to doing our previews and stuff, but I think you'd rather get them in September, right, than you would in November probably. And I think that's something that probably stands out a little bit just in terms of, I think that game is at least placed nicely from that standpoint. Because I do, I wonder what year one looks like completely for Hugh Freeze, because as we know, you would expect them to improve in a lot of areas, just given kind of what you expect once, he gets everything in place there. So I think just having that game in September, probably, like I said, better than November. But, beyond that, I mean, the South Carolina game, as you guys said, I mean, it's another one that obviously high expectations, no love lost there from the Gamecocks and the Bulldogs. But I think that's another team probably just to have them a little bit earlier. The non-conference game's really hard to, say anything other than what you would expect from a Georgia non-conference game, just given the talent that's there for Kirby Smart and company. But yeah, I think that Auburn game to me is just it's an interesting one because it does lead into that game against the Kentucky team that I know probably all of us are pretty high on, I would think, in terms of what that offense could be this season. So just kind of how that Auburn game shakes out on the road could be very interesting.
And Chris, it's going to be real hot September 16th at 3:30 in Athens when they take on South Carolina. So it is not going to be one that the patrons are going to enjoy unless they're already a little warm themselves going into the game, probably, and that's a high probability in Athens.
That's a very high probability in Athens. Well, my thoughts on September quickly.
That'd have been a great transition if we had a sponsor. A little warmth.
That would have been.
If you want to sponsor the show for that segue, please let us know. The email's in the description below.
Especially if you deal in air conditioning. Yeah, let's before we move on to October, my quick thoughts on the schedule is look, Georgia's got plenty of talent. Everybody knows it, but Georgia lost a ton of draft picks again, and maybe more importantly, is breaking in a new quarterback. And certainly Georgia's got talent, but I think preferably you're breaking in with UT Martin and Ball State rather than LSU and Alabama, something like that under the circumstances. So I kind of like the flow of Georgia's schedule here, given the makeup of the roster in Athens this year. Okay, October, and this is really more of a fluke of the calendar than anything. Georgia only has 3 games in October. It has the 7th, Kentucky, and that's in Athens. Vanderbilt on the road. That hasn't mattered where they've played that game lately. Georgia has just run over Vanderbilt. And then a week off before the game formerly known as the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville against the Gators. Kentucky could be the toughest one of the bunch, guys. I don't know, although that one's in Athens. I don't really know what to make of Florida yet. That'll be interesting when we do our analysis of the Gators. But thoughts on October, starting with you, please, Blake.
Well, I mean, I think that, like I just said, it's sort of just that Auburn game to me. It's like, what does the Kentucky game look like based on? I think I've seen some people talk about the Auburn game for Georgia, like where, kind of where the schedule falls. Is it like that Missouri game last season where it's kind of one of those that sort of, I don't think necessarily catches up on you the same way because, again, it's, there's a lot of high profile discussion around this Auburn team just based on having a new coach and the expectations are high. But I think that Kentucky game, certainly the one, just kind of leading off, could be interesting depending on what the Cats look like to that point. As we said, I think we'll all probably agree that there's certainly a lot of a lot of pieces in place for Kentucky, especially given what they brought in, on the offensive side and those things. So I'm curious to see how that game unfolds. You mentioned Vanderbilt. I mean, I think Vanderbilt will be better, but it just like you mentioned, Chris, it hadn't mattered at all. And then Florida, I think Florida is just a huge wild card. In all honesty, I mean, I don't know what you guys think. We'll talk about them in another video, but I think that's just such a wild card with Florida. Like I said to start, I just I don't see a lot on the schedule thus far that would make me that nervous if I'm a Georgia fan, and I don't know that Florida, based on what the expectations are, I don't know that things completely turn around for the Gators this season. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're talking about Florida, you said, Chris, you don't know exactly what to make out of Florida. I'll tell you what to make out of Florida. Not much. They're not going to be very good this year. So Florida fans, might want to turn away for this video, but that's not going to be very good. I do think Kentucky will be good, as Blake pointed out. When you bring in a quarterback the caliber of Devin Leary and you have those receivers over there. Now Georgia, for Georgia's benefit, it is at Sanford Stadium, so there you go with that. But you're talking about, as Bill Rafferty, I think, used to say with college. You guys cover college basketball. He likes to say the fly in the ointment, so to speak. Well, Kentucky could be the fly in the ointment this year out there. I think they're going to be really good under Mark Stoops. You could be looking at the third 10-win season there for Mark Stoops in Kentucky. I really think they're going to be a very, very good team, and they always play Georgia tough. It doesn't matter if they're the sad sacks on the block that year, or if they're really, really good. For some reason, it's like Vandy under I'm blanking on his name, Penn State coach Franklin. When Franklin was there
James
at Vandy,
Franklin.
they always played Georgia tough. So Kentucky should do so as well. So I think that's an interesting little stretch there of the schedule.
November, the Bulldogs have 4 games, starting with Missouri, which gave Georgia probably its biggest fit of the season last year in Columbia. This time in Athens, maybe that plays to Georgia's advantage a little bit after Missouri got its attention a year ago. Ole Miss, seems like it's been a minute since those two teams played. Then the game at Tennessee, which could be interesting, certainly offensively, I think it would be, given the way Josh Heupel's guys have moved the ball. And then at Georgia Tech under Brent Key, who is the interim coach who got the full-time job this year. Tech should be a little bit better, but that one's been a little lopsided lately and probably figures to be again this year. Blayne, your take on the 4 games for the Bulldogs in the month of November.
Missouri was the team that played Georgia the best of any team in the country last year. At any point, they played Georgia better. They had them on the ropes. They could have beaten Georgia if it weren't for a touchdown saving tackle by Malachi Starks at like the 1-yard line. So Missouri plays well against Georgia, and they have a very experienced defense. So that will not be a game that Georgia overlooks. Kirby Smart will make sure of that. Then 2 really tough games there with Ole Miss and Tennessee, 2 explosive offenses. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be for Ole Miss yet. Is it going to be Spencer Saunders? Is it going to be Jackson Dart? Does Walker Howard take over by that point in the year? Who knows? But you're getting your defense your offense is going to be tested against Missouri because they've got a tremendously experienced and talented defense. And then your defense will be tested the 2 weeks after that. And you're correct. Brent Key will have Georgia Tech playing a more physical brand of football. They played Georgia well in the first half last year of that game and actually well into the third quarter. So not in the meat of this schedule is in November. You could say it's like the Thanksgiving turkey of the schedule, Blake.
Yeah, there you go. The Thanksgiving turkey, for sure. I mean, look, the game we're circling the most is obviously the one in Tennessee. I think that's the one that should have the most attention, of course, depending on where both teams are at that point in the season. I think we'd all be shocked if Georgia's not, right there where they usually are at that point in the season. Tennessee obviously going to make a few changes, have some guys to replace, but you would still have a lot of confidence, I think, in what they can do to continue the momentum from last season. So, yeah, it will be very interesting, I think, to sort of see, just kind of what that looks like. And once they get to that month, because really it's just going to be, I think it's all about kind of that Tennessee game and seeing where both teams are. And I do have in my notes here, my trivia fact and I may get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is right. The latest Georgia-Tennessee game since 1906. They played on November the 21st, 1906, fellas. Do you want to know what the score was in that game?
2-0.
Ooh, a double off the wall there is what Chris. He's got too much baseball off the brain. I'm gonna say. I don't even
Chris
know if they
is close.
kicked. I don't know
Chris
if they
is
kicked
close.
field goals back then. I'll say 7-6. I don't know.
It was a 0-0 tie. I don't know how that happened, but that is what I see on the official website. I think it was Georgia. Yeah. Like November 21st, 1906, tied. They played November 13th a few seasons ago. So that's the only factoid I have, but I'll kind of wrap it up with this. Like this entire schedule, like I said earlier, the fact that there's no LSU, there's no Alabama, there's no A&M, there's no Arkansas. I'm curious to see kind of what order we wind up putting those West teams in. But, overall, I think to get Ole Miss in Athens and you just kind of look at the rest of the schedule, we said the Auburn game's kind of interesting, but yeah, I mean, I think that just sets up really nicely. And that game at Tennessee and Knoxville at Neyland Stadium is the one that I think you circle the most as of right now for me.
Blayne, I mean, this would seem to set up nicely for Georgia, given again what the Bulldogs face in terms of replacing players.
I mean, when you're talking about replacing players, it's really more reloading at this point with the Georgia class. Time and time again in terms of recruiting and things like that. The biggest loss, Stetson Bennett, you got Carson Beck coming in there. But I'm just telling you, don't expect a whole lot of a drop-off talent level-wise because, Kirby's been recruiting at a tremendously high level. And I think this schedule, even though we have mentioned there are some potential pitfalls despite the narrative out there, it does set up nicely once again for a very talented team, the Vegas favorite to win the national championship at this point, coming into the year to be right there again in the SEC championship. And, I think it's just worth pointing out, Chris, that this year is one that will be looked back at in NCAA college football history because divisions are going to change. The way conference championships are designed are going to change. So take a little snapshot of this 2023 Georgia schedule and save it if you're a Georgia fan because it's never going to look like this again.
We'll take a snapshot of the screen, too. I'm glad you guys got the memo on wearing your Braves hats tonight.
I just realized that. Good job, everyone.
Oh, man. Didn't even realize it. Go Braves. We will say that. We are unashamed Braves fans around here at South. But the Braves cover all of SEC country.
Braves versus Georgia, who wins?
Ooh, depends on what
Georgia hasn't lost in years. I mean, come on. Braves have lost a game in a couple of years, right? It's got to be Georgia, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, it's been fun. We're going to be doing these for every team. We've got tons of off-season football content coming your way. We're just getting cranked up in early June, and if you're watching this in early June, yours truly has got you covered with SEC baseball. Georgia not involved there, although it did make a head coaching hire, I think, today as we're doing this. So won't hit that in this video, but we'll have plenty more on SEC baseball and on Georgia football, as well as the other 13 SEC teams. So best way to get that, hit that subscribe button. For Blake Lovell and Blayne Gilmer, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon with more SEC content.